Welcome to the King Me Ministries podcast with your host, Dennis Knight. It stands true that out of every 100 men, 10 shouldn't be there. 80 are just targets. 9 are the real fighters, and we are lucky to have them. But the one is a warrior, and he will bring the others back.
Welcome to this week's podcast. It's a pleasure for me to share a conversation that I recently had with a man who is quickly becoming a friend of mine. His name is Bernie McGraw. He's a strong Christian man. He loves his wife. He's raised 5 children, and he's serving the Lord now as a life coach. He is dedicating himself to helping others achieve their highest potential in whatever field that they're in. He specializes in ministry and health. But God has recently put it on his heart to help dads navigate the crazy demands and the awesome opportunities that all dads have. Bernie's desire to help dads has caught my ear, and I knew I had to have him on to pick his brain and hear his story. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. So, Bernie, welcome. It's nice to have you on the program.
Hey, Dennis, it's great to be here with you today.
So how was your Thanksgiving?
I had a great Thanksgiving. I kind of got the best of both worlds. I live in Florida, so I hung out with my family down here, and then I got on a plane and went to Virginia and was able to spend the rest of the long weekend with my mom, who was 94, and 2 of my sisters and some extended family. So yeah, it was awesome. Much to be thankful for.
For sure. 94 years old. That's remarkable.
Yeah, we had a scare earlier this year, but God, evidently it wasn't her time. So I said, as long as you have breath, Mom, you got some purpose there. So
it's so true.
Great to see her. She's
so
doing
true.
Great.
Well, getting right into it, my dad used to say this. He says, find what wakes you up in the morning, not what keeps you up at night. And with that in mind, what is it that makes you you? What wakes you up in the morning, Bernie?
Well, wow, that's a loaded question.
For sure.
Go in many different directions. I probably could sum it down to there's 3 emphases that I have in my life. Obviously, my faith in God. I've been born and raised in church my whole life, so it's kind of what I've done. I've known, and I'm very thankful for that. So my relationship with God is forefront. Part of that package was, I was involved full-time ministry for 38 years. So, that was that calling, that passion to, I was a worship leader and a team builder. So kind of that was something that woke me up. Obviously it pivoted to something different at this point after 38 years, but really that faith pillar is knowing who gives me the breath first thing in the morning, who sustained me through the night. Family is a huge thing to me. And I know that sounds really cliche, but I truly mean it. I've been blessed with just 5 wonderful kids. My wife and I have been married 36 years. I just love doing life with them. 7 grandchildren as a result of that, which they're actually the best.
They really are.
They are. So family, just, I actually had somebody reach out to me based on a post I made earlier of just flying home with my daughter sitting by my wife and I. And he said, man, I just love seeing how your family does things together. And we do like to be together. So that's kind of another pillar. But that also can be heavy and consuming at times because it gets me up in the morning, but it does sometimes keep me up at night. And then the last part is really, just had a personal transformation in my health, which led me to more of a personal development and personal growth. So from a leadership standpoint, that aspect of life, partnering with people, and I just have a desire to help and lift others up. John Maxwell says leaders are lifters, and that really is kind of the passion of my heart, is being able to encourage and lift others up. So really those three focuses, probably I could answer that.
Yeah, definitely not cliche. You know, some people may take it as that, but the more you dig, the more you discover, the more you see, like, that's really what grounds people. This
Hmm.
family, this faith, and just purpose. You know,
Hmm.
that's beyond you, that's bigger than you, that will outlast you. And so far from a cliche, it really is. And I think our country's kind of realizing that even in this moment of like,
Absolutely.
we have to get back to that because that's what it just opens up every other door. Here at King Me Ministries, one of the things that we love to do is we're learning to do is to celebrate men who get it right. And
Mm.
when we celebrate men like yourself who, you know, not perfect, none of us are perfect, but a person who understands that, men that understand that, we want to celebrate them. We want to pick their brain, and we want to use the things that God has developed in you that we could equip the men that want to get it right, but that
Mm.
they just don't have it. And the reason that I wanted to have you on the podcast today is really because you had been speaking sort of in some social media circles about this new thing that you're doing with dads. And, you know, while King Me Ministries is about the man, one of my greatest passions is the relationship with a dad and his children, and ultimately between a dad and a son, because
Hmm.
that's what sort of seems to take it to that next level of recreating yourself. So can you tell us a little bit about what's going to happen, what you're looking to do with this new thing that you're doing, right from what you're calling it to what you're hoping to accomplish?
Sure. Well, you know, it's funny because you read my mind because as soon as you said dad's getting it right, I thought, oh no, I don't know. I don't get that right all the time. So, and then you addressed that, but, well, let me just take 2 minutes to give you a little bit of my backstory so that you can understand where why my passion is where it is. So, my dad growing up he was raised by alcoholic parents. So at age 10, his whole family, there were six siblings, were separated, two in one direction, two in another, and two in another, from the state because, though his parents loved them, they didn't have the ability to care for them. So then obviously he has four children. I'm the youngest, and, great man, great provider as far as working hard, lots of jobs, but very absent from a dad role, if that makes sense. And I always hesitate because if ever anybody that knew him heard me say this, I certainly don't want to shed light on him in a bad way. But in reality, he didn't have the ability to parent me or be a dad the way I always wanted to have a dad.
Hmm.
So it left a void. There was really a void. You know, we did not have that close relationship. He passed away 25 years ago, and honestly, at that stage, we were the closest we had been. But that we're so those early years were so developing and, learning about ourselves, and there just wasn't that present person in my life from a male role.
Hmm.
Always left a void in my life. So before I had children, I had already determined, that I was going to try to parent differently, that I would try to be there, not just in the home, but be present, being at the baseball fields, in the basketball stands, you know, whatever, marching band, whatever it was, dance recitals. I just really did my best to juggle my life so that I could be a present dad, not a perfect dad, but a present dad. Um, and I'll even say with the perfect aspect, there's an element of there were times that I found myself speaking to my kids like my dad would speak to me. And I remember when I was a kid not liking that feeling of being, you know, he's really gruff, kind of angry, and seemed ticked off a lot. Uh, and I remember one time specifically, they were pretty little, and I literally heard my dad come out of my mouth. And I apologized. I said, you know, guys, dad's really sorry because it really had nothing to do with what they were doing. It had to do with something else, but that's the people closest to me is what it took it out. So I have found that the older I get, the more I realize that there's a lack of, um, mentorship, maybe is a word, or, aspect of what does a dad look like? How do I maneuver journeys? You know, I feel like dads a lot of times give and give and give, and they don't take care of themselves.
Hmm.
And, they kind of get leftovers, so to speak. and even feel guilty of reaching out to somebody or investing in themselves. So anyway, at this point, I just have really, since I stepped down from full-time ministry, one of the things that, besides, partnering with pastors and those type of people, it has been a real passion, especially this year. The more I'm talking to young men, I realize more and more there's a need for older dads to have a voice in a younger dad's life. And even I guess not even wanting to say the word voice. Sometimes it's just ears. It's not using my voice to say you should do this. It's more of just listening and letting them have a place to process. And so from a coaching standpoint, I'm kind of adding that layer of wanting to be a part of of that ability to come alongside younger dads and just provide a safe spot. And one of the ways that I want to do that is even just through some, 4-week coaching group sessions, where, a dad might not be able to afford one-on-one coaching or may not want one-on-one coaching or something that would last for several months. But he might say, hey, I would love to jump in a room with 10 other dads and just listen to other guys and realize, wow, I'm not the only one that feels this way, or I'm not the only one that, has failed, or I've, because there's a lot of feeling like a failure sometimes when you don't always get it right. Comparison is pretty tough, and we all look at people that are we assume are perfect, and we realize we're not, and so we kind of get in that shame game, and so just providing a safe place for there to be a spot for dads to process some life.
Well, that's exciting. So at the end of this, I'll kind of ask you to give me some websites or some way for people to contact you, because I believe wholeheartedly in what you're saying, and kind of like putting some words to some of the things that you're seeing is I see a lot of men walking around, men as in their role as husbands, men in their role in their community, and especially for the sake of this conversation, they have no idea how to define their role as a dad. And so there's this group of men, and the number is massive. They're walking around and they were never initiated. Nobody ever said, I see you as a man. And so they're looking for this ever-changing definition that the world is giving them of what it means to be a man or a dad. You're not really a good dad unless your son is captain of the football team. You're not really a good dad if your son's not athletic. If your son's not at the top of his class, or if your son gets bullied, or if your son couldn't defend himself in a fist fight, you're failing as a dad. And so I see that a lot with men in every aspect of manhood, is that it's almost like the goalpost keeps moving. And so they run after this definition, and when they realize that that's as empty as the last one, they go for the next one. And so one of the things that I see and hear in you is you've sort of arrived at, I think, some of the same things. I spoke to another man yesterday, and using different words, he says, we as men who we're not perfect, but we've seemed to have been here long enough, and we've gone through that healing process, and we're older dads too, in the sense of we have some kids that God allowed us to make some mistakes and learn through the process. But it looks like to me, as I'm trying to bring it into focus, is we have to define what it means to be a man. And then the next step has to be, you can't stop when defining it, because when you do that, I'm going to realize, well, I don't measure up and I'm not there yet. And so that then the initiation process has to go from defining it to providing a roadmap. Like, how do I help men discover along my own journey? How do we give them a roadmap to being there? And I think ultimately last, and something that our culture doesn't do very well, is we don't celebrate the arrival of a man or a dad that's put himself on the scene. And so I hear that coming out of your heart with dads, and it's something that a friend of mine, Anthony, is really kind of pouring himself into. And the more he pours, the more he discovers this incredible need for that. And so I thank you for sharing that. And I pray literally that men are seeing the value in getting together with you. And, you had shared with me in another conversation that being a leader, or especially sort of in a counseling role or coaching role, is learning how to listen. And sometimes when you are that safe landing space for people to talk, they oftentimes will arrive where they need to arrive. But do you mind if I go back and chat a little bit about your relationship with your dad?
No, that would be fine.
I think it's very important, and I'll share a quick story. I remember I got an injury when I was a little kid, and I had sat on a pole and it went several inches into my leg, and they closed it up, and then a couple weeks later it just was infected, and the doctor said we have to lance it open, and then what we're going to do is my mom had to literally take these longer Q-tips and stick it in the wound and let it heal from the inside out. And that's a little bit gruesome, but the reason that I share that is so many times that's what God does. He has to bring us back into our wound so that he can heal it his way. And it's the only way. And it's pretty awesome to hear that, we don't want to judge your dad too much because he absolutely was able to move the ball a lot to raise you differently than the way that he had to, and with what he was able to work with. But have you heard that, and I'm certain you've heard this before, that sometimes we either become just like our fathers or we become 180 degrees different than our dad? Have you heard that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think without some intentionality, we will reproduce what we've seen, what we've known, even the stuff that we don't like. I think that's duplicatable throughout, whether it's alcohol, whether it's whatever. There's that element of becoming like the surroundings that you live in, even to the point of not liking where you're at and the things that you don't like about, whether it be your dad, your mom, whatever. That's just because that's our surroundings. That's the power of the way we're raised and the way that we are. So I remember making the conscious choice that I was not going to do that, not in a shameful way with my dad. But I was in college and I had the eye-opening experience that my dad will never be able to provide for me what I'm looking for. Like he can't, he doesn't know how. And obviously, as an older man generation, the tools that we have today, calls like this, I mean, these just didn't exist, So, he did the best that he could. And I had to really let that go and really say, I either walk around with a wound. You used the word wound, and I actually wrote that down before you even said it. I think there's a lot of wounded dads, a lot of wounded males, and we have never been good at providing a space for a man to enter into a safe place to talk about those wounds, because it's a sign of weaknesses in most people's mind. Like we got to just put on, but that starts from an early age when just get back up, we don't cry. We don't, that's just ingrained in most males that they don't acknowledge that part of their life. And that carries over into marriage, and then obviously raising children, and then decades go by with this wound walking around in this heart of this man, and most of the time, then it's repeated. If there's not, the word I like is intentionality. If there's really just not an intentionality to, if your dad's not the mentor you need, find somebody it doesn't even have to be somebody it can just be, I mean, a lot of my mentors in my life would be people I've never met. I just studied them from a distance. So yeah.
Yeah. Would you say that you found a mentor in this journey to discover this, or was it really just a clear understanding of how your dad had fathered you and how you wanted to be? Or were you exposed to another family, another father who was leading in a way that sort of just kind of, you felt drawn to that?
So for me, it was more of just making the decision, when I was in college. And I even, I haven't really shared this too much, but I even wrote a letter to my dad in college, really kind of asking him to forgive me for the things that I was kind of like, and most human natures, well, you weren't the one that I had really developed some hardness and some anger towards my dad. And so, and the funny thing is I know that he read the letter, but we never discussed the letter.
Interesting.
But from my vantage point, I was set free that day. Like I literally, there was something that was cut off of this expectation. So then I began to pursue not, I wouldn't say like one-on-one type. There was a specific, I can't say, oh, this man and this man, but I just would have begun to observe the way some dads were with their children.
Hmm.
I also used the fuel of what I wished I had had to begin to map out my journey
Hmm.
with my own kids, from affection, loving on my boys I have 5 kids, 3 boys, 2 girls, and loving on them when they were little, hugging them, kissing them. Yeah, there reached a time that wasn't probably cool with them, so kind of backed away. But we still, I just saw all of my 5 kids within the last week, and we say I love you. It's just that's just something I've tried to be intentional, and which is hard for me because I wasn't raised like with that as obviously. So I've had to again be intentional with being a little bit more vocal with those type of things. So I wouldn't say it's a person. It was just I chose to set out to observe and watch, and not from a jealous standpoint of, man, I wished, there was definitely feelings of, man, I would have loved to have that. And again, my dad was an awesome man. He did what he knew he could do at that time. And, can't wait to see him again in heaven. But,
what a remarkable honor it is to be able to say to your dad, I'm so impressed that you were able to overcome what you saw as a child.
Yeah.
And what a remarkable, just a testimony to God, not always seeming to fix everything perfectly in the moment, but there's this coming of this restoration of how he was able to break that, and then how you were able to take it further. And I remember a mentor when I was a kid. I was maybe 12, and my dad, very similar to yours, my dad's dad was an alcoholic. He was a working alcoholic. He was always drinking, but never drunk. Right. And that's always that's a cliche as well, but that's who he was. And my dad, I think maybe more than 3 times in my life, I'd seen him drink a beer. He just wasn't a drinker, and he was able to kind of break that. But one of the things that my dad was not really good at was he was really good at showing that he loved us, but he was not very good at telling us, like physically saying, I love you. And this mentor had said, you need to start telling your dad you love him all the time. And as I look back on that and that wisdom, and I remember just saying, I love you, Dad. I love you, Dad. And then this slow progression of, yeah, me too. I know, son, to, yep. And then, I love you. I love you. And then he would text me in the later part of his life through social media. And like, I still have it, he's been gone 10 years this past Thanksgiving. And I look back on social media, and he would send me these Facebook messages, and he'd be like, I love you, son. I'm thinking about you, son. I'm so proud of you, son. And I look back at that, and I'm like, God used me to break that one thing that I lacked. And he provided that, and he allowed me to be a part of that process. And I just am overwhelmed, but by God's grace in that, and I just get pretty emotionally been thinking about, being used like that.
well, I'm sitting here like with a tear ready to come out, because I had a very similar experience, and I would intentionally say I love you, Dad, and he would repeat it, but never really had ever initiated that comment. I remember I was in my apartment, and I was newly married, and I remember the first time he ended the conversation, and he said it for the first time. And that was, I was late 20s. And I felt like a little 2-year-old, it really meant the world to me. And that's kind of what I had been looking for, was not, the best toys. And, I think as dads, we just think if we give and give and give, we buy and buy and buy, we sign kids up on every sports team and on all those things. And a lot of times, Dad, if you're listening, they just want some simple things. They just really want you. They want your time. They want your hugs. They want your sit down and play with them and not feel like they're in the way. And so it's funny that you mentioned that story, because I had a very, very similar experience. And I still remember it. That's 35 years ago now. So
35 years ago, he said
probably,
it. Yeah,
probably, yeah.
I love that. That is so awesome.
Pretty powerful.
It is so powerful. So fast forwarding a little bit to you as a dad, you said you're the dad of 5 children.
Mm-hmm.
What's the
5
ages,
adult kids.
oldest to youngest?
34 to 22.
22. So you're an empty nester in a sense.
We still have I'll say 1.5 kids. One is in transit, moving. His rental had been sold, and so he came back here for a little bit. He's moving out this month. And then my youngest, she graduated a year ago from college and is working full time,
Okay.
and kind of she's being smart. She's paying off her college debt while she's at home with mom and dad. And but she's very frugal, and she's doing a really good job. So, and we enjoy. So we're not completely empty nesters, but we spend a lot of time as an empty nest because they're busy. So
Sure, sure. So I would, kind of being cognizant of your time, I wanted to share this thing and then kind of get your idea on it. And I remember being a young dad. I think my son was 6 and my daughter at that time was 3. And I went to this conference for dads and for men, and they handed out these 3x5 cards. And the speaker said, "Now I want you to write on the front of it what you hope your children say in the conversation after you leave, after you're gone. What do you hope they say about you?" And then in a kind of a twist, they said, "Now flip the card over, and I want you to write on the back the things that you can do today to bring about those statements that you want them to say about you today." So it's, wanting them to say something powerful about your relationship, or as you said, the word intentionality. I want them to speak about how intentional dad was to be there, how intentional dad was to say I love you, how intentional dad was to acknowledge a mistake. But what are you going to do in this moment that's going to bring you to that? And so I would ask you that, and so what did you as a dad hope that your kids would say about you once they start raising their own children and your relationship changes, and ultimately when you go to be with the Lord?
well, I mean, somewhat that's an easy answer for me. I've always just wanted them to know that the tangible aspect that I love them, through the good, the bad, and the ugly. Having adult children, obviously, there's some of all of that come into play. And I think I'll sum it up with just a 30-second story of one of my sons was struggling in high school, and it was a tough thing for his mom and I. It was just one of those, really, without going into details, just really a tough experience. A lot of tough love had to be shown, and I believe in the power of prayer, and I prayed, like the prodigal son said, that the prodigal son came to his senses. And I literally prayed that every day, that he would come to his senses. And as God saw fit, that happened. And we were having a time together as a family. And one of the things that he said to me, personally, was, he said, "No matter how far I went and no matter what I did, I always knew you loved me." And really, to me, that's what Father God should look like to us.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like as a dad, that's really our role, is to reflect the Father. And that was really kind of a heartbeat for me, is that they would not, even through failures, disappointment, shame, all of the things that accompany decisions and choices, that they just are always aware that I love them. And again, certainly not done perfectly, but that's my number one takeaway, is that I'm a real person, and I'm authentic. And another one said, "You love us all the same." And, it's not like, "Oh, she's behaved, so we love her more than," it's just, that those two comments have just, and those were years ago, have always stuck with me. And it's always been a desire of mine, is that they would, because I do believe that kids learn what God the Father looks like as a result of a lot of times what their dad looks like. And I know that can bring shame to people. And I don't mean it that way, because even my story alone can prove that things can change. But I do think there is an element to reflecting that Father heart of God that I've always wanted to do. And
the Bible verse where Jesus says, "And they will know that you're my followers not by the home that you provided for them, not by the vacations that you took, not by the inheritance you were able to leave them. They will know you were that you were my child by love.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever made the connection in that Bible verse about my role as a dad and my role as a husband. I always look at that facing out, right? From the front porch out, I say, this world needs to know that I'm his follower by the way that I love them. And I don't think I've ever made that connection until I just saw a tear in your eye that first and foremost has to happen at home.
Yeah.
That they will know that I'm a child of God by the way that I love them. And what a legacy. And I think that God is not looking for perfection, right? And you had said this, I wrote it down as you were saying, he's not looking for perfect, he's looking for present. And you can't love your kids from a distance. I have a sign on my wall that says error increases with distance. And you can say love diminishes with distance, right? And as I'm kind of unpacking and verbally processing some of the things that you've said, but Bernie, I think you have a powerful message, and I think that fathers would be missing out if they don't look to take advantage of what you are almost navigating just without an agenda. You see the need, you have the platform to bring some men together, and you have a beautiful heart of just being able to listen and actually hear and guide. And I will say that the greatest 2 years of my growth as a Christian man I was 23 years old. I'm 48 now, and it was a pastor whose wife was actually pastoring this small church that I had just kind of come back to the faith, and he had gathered just a small group of men. There were two of us at the first, and then it ended up growing to like 8, and then 12, and then it was kind of too big, and then there was like God called like 5 of us away in the same summer to go and start ministries. I had moved from Maine to Ohio at that time, but he offered exactly what I see in your heart and what I see in your intentionality of offering these men and these dads. Is it's just a place to come, to be real, to be able to have a voice, and to be able to sort of see what some of these other dads are either struggling with or how they've been able to overcome these struggles. And my prayer over you today and over your ministry is that God would help the world see the value in what you're offering. Because men need a definition of what it truly looks like to be not perfect, but to be present, right? And I'm going to run that to the end for my own life too. But then they also need a sort of a community of men that's going to help them with that roadmap. How do I get to where I want to be as a dad? I want to be different than my dad, but how? How do I let go of this? How do I allow God to heal this? How do I stop doing this? And then when those things are achieved, to see a group of men come around them and say, my brother, you're on that path, may God continue to bless that. And so I'm excited for you. I may even look at trying to see how to be a part of that, but guys that want to find out what you're doing and what you're offering, how can they reach you? How can they get a hold of you? What's the best way to
Well, the
tap
best
in?
way, there's really two different ways. I do have a website, McGrawCoachingSolutions.com. That's a fairly long, so 3 words, McGrawCoachingSolutions.com. They can go there and, get my email, send an email to me. I have a kind of a jot form that I send them with some questions just to kind of get them thinking about, would this be a good fit for them? And again, we're talking, in this particular venue, we're talking, like a 4-week commitment type thing, weekly for an hour. I'm also on social media. So Bernie McGraw, under Facebook, McGraw Coaching Solutions under Instagram, LinkedIn. So a variety of different ways. But probably the easiest would be just to jump on the website, and then be able to just grab my email and send me an email that way, and kind of identify your podcast, and so I'll know where the connection is.
Awesome. So I'm going to end this with one question, and it's kind of off the cuff, but what would you say, and you'd probably love to have a lot more time to think of an answer, but what would you say the greatest advice that you've received from a father or from a mentor that has helped you become the man that you are today without having too much time to think?
Yeah, without like a specific quote or anything, is just, to be authentic and to be real, not pretending, not trying to be somebody you're not, um, but just to kind of be authentic to who you are, because kids can read through that, and also realize the priority of time versus gifts. And I'm not, we're going into Christmas season. I understand that, and gifts are important. I love getting gifts, but that gift will soon be forgotten. And when your day comes and your time is done, they're not going to talk about what you got them at Christmas. They're going to talk about the fact that you were at the basketball games, you were there, on the late phone calls, the texts at night when they're in college and things like that. And that doesn't cost any money. We make it hard as dads because we think they want so much more. So I just think, being authentic is just important. I think kids read through things, especially this generation. They're very, very high alert on what's real and what's not, and just owning yourself, like owning your own story, owning your own struggles. We have such a perfect world, and no one is perfect, but we present ourselves as perfect. And I can certainly relate to a dad that talks to me about, man, I'm just really struggling, feeling like a failure right now. I can relate to that person versus this one, and my kids are perfect, and they're, all the lists of all the accolades and all the things. I personally can relate to the guy that says, man, I feel like a failure today, because that's been my story at times. So I think just being authentic, being real, that's kind of probably what has served me well. And to be present. That's the key word probably for me, is just being present.
It's clear to me that the enemy wants to isolate men, husbands, fathers. He wants to isolate them, and then he's able to destroy them. And I think you're doing a phenomenal job in this little season of trying to bring these dads together, of giving them that strength, that accountability, that brother to lean on to overcome what the enemy's trying to do in that isolation. So I pray that God continues to bless everything that you're doing in his name. I think God's got great things in store for what you're doing. And you absolutely come across as authentic. Mm-hmm. And the quote that I'm thinking about when you're sharing that advice is this: be rather than appear.
Yeah.
Right. Just be who you are. Be there. Don't try to manufacture something, because our children, our wives, other men, can see right through that. So just be real and be present. So thank you so much for being here today. I will definitely put all of your contact information on the website so that others can find it. And again, thank you, brother. I loved chatting with you today.
Yeah, Dennis, thanks for that. Just thanks for what you're doing in the lives of dads. I think there's a stigma that comes along with this as being weak. And, I want to pull that stigma down, and because everybody needs a place that's safe. And so there's no weakness in admitting, I need some help, or I just need a place to hang. So
well said, brother. Thank you so much.
God bless you.
All right. God bless you. Hey guys, thanks for listening. As you can tell, Bernie is a quality guy. And if this is what you're looking for, if you need to make that connection, I know that he'd be delighted to work with you, and it would be worth your time. Go ahead and check out his website at McGrawCoachingSolutions.com and look for him on social media outlets. And as always, guys, I covet your reviews of this podcast, and I'm open to any suggestions for topics or guests. And my prayer continues to be that God will raise up more men who are unafraid to just be what God had created them to be. God bless you guys.